Year 1815. That was a year when all of Europe breathed a sigh of relief. The monster Napoleon Bonaparte was finally shackled at the remote island of St. Helena. But in a small village named Schönhausen, belonging to the Kingdom of Prussia, another monster had just been born. On April 1st, 1815, Otto Edward Leopold von Bismarck uttered his first cry. At that time, if you looked at the map, you would not see the name Germany. Instead, it was a massive patchwork of 39 small pieces, kingdoms, duchies, free cities, fragmented and always eyeing each other with suspicion. The German people shared a common language, but they did not have a common home. And young Otto, growing up among the fertile fields of the Junker aristocracy, soon realized this through stories about the collapse of the Holy Roman Empire under the marching boots of the French. Otto was not a standard, well-behaved child. In his veins was a strange mixture. A rigid, aristocratic father who loved his estate more than politics, and an intellectual, sharp mother who always pushed her son to reach the heights in Berlin. His mother, Mrs. Wilhelmina, was a visionary woman. She hated the boring life in the countryside and wanted Otto to become a brilliant politician. At the age of 7, Otto was sent to a harsh boarding school in Berlin. There, the country boy from Brandenburg learned his first lesson in survival: Prussian iron discipline. The university years at Göttingen were a chapter full of rebellion. Otto was not an exemplary student with thick law books. Instead, people saw a tall young man with a beard, famous for sword duels and all-night drinking bouts. They called him Wild Bismarck. He was in debt. He challenged others. He showed an arrogant ego, but behind that reckless appearance was a sharp mind observing the world. He saw Prussia sleeping in its old glory, while other powers like Britain and France were transforming strongly. In 1839, his mother passed away. Bismarck quit his tedious desk job in the government to return to take care of the estate. In the silence of the countryside, that wild man began to contemplate. He read the Bible, read history, and began to participate in local religious and political debates. And then, fate knocked on the door in 1847. In 1847, Bismarck was chosen for the United Diet of Prussia. This was the first time he stood before the light of power. While his colleagues were intoxicated with liberal and democratic ideals in the British or French style, Bismarck chose a path of his own: extreme loyalty to the king and country. He stood on the podium, his voice resounding, challenging those who wanted to limit the king's power. He believed that only a strong monarch could keep Prussia from falling apart. But then, the real storm hit. 1848, the spring of nations. All of Europe exploded in revolutionary fire and smoke. From Paris, the fire spread to Berlin. People took to the streets, demanding a constitution and freedom. King Friedrich Wilhelm IV, a weak and indecisive man, had to take off his hat and bow before the bodies of the protesters. Prussia was on the brink of the collapse of the monarchy. While other nobles trembled and hid in cellars, what did Bismarck do? He intended to organize a peasant army from his estate, arming them with scythes and hunting rifles to march to Berlin to rescue the king. Even though the plan failed, that action made the name Bismarck deeply imprinted in the memory of the royal family. He was not a greenhouse politician. He was a drawing room warrior, ready to use violence to protect order. The 1848 revolution failed because of the division of the rebels themselves, but it left a valuable lesson for Bismarck. Nationalism is a powerful weapon. Instead of fighting it, why not tame it to serve Prussia? In the following decade, Bismarck was sent as an ambassador to Russia and France. This was not an exile, but a high-level course in geopolitics. In St. Petersburg, he learned how to please the czars. In Paris, he observed Napoleon III, a man who used populism to rule the country. He realized that, in the game of empires, there are no permanent allies, only the interests of Prussia are supreme. September 1862, the Kingdom of Prussia fell into a total stalemate. King Wilhelm II wanted to increase the military budget to confront Austria, but the Liberal Parliament refused to spend a penny. The king was so desperate that he had already written his abdication letter. Right at that moment, an urgent telegram was sent to Paris, where Bismarck was serving as ambassador. "Come immediately. The situation is extremely critical." Bismarck returned. In a private meeting with the king, he made an all-or-nothing bet. He looked directly into Wilhelm III's eyes and said, "I will fight with your majesty. I will not resign until the army is reformed, even if I have to face the parliament or the whole world." Wilhelm II tore up the abdication letter. Bismarck was appointed prime minister. Just a few days later, Bismarck entered the parliament. The atmosphere in the room was thick with hatred. The liberal members looked at him as an outdated dictator. But Bismarck did not come there to plead. He stood up, his posture looming, and uttered the words that changed the course of history. Prussia's position in Germany will not be determined by liberalism, but by its power. The great issues of the day will not be decided by speeches or majority decisions. That was the great mistake of 1848 and 1849. But by blood and iron. The entire room fell silent for a moment before exploding in boos. People called him a madman, a destroyer of the Constitution. But Bismarck didn't care. He began to run the government without a budget approval. He started working with Helmuth von Moltke, a silent military genius, and Albrecht von Roon, a talented military organizer. Prussia began to forge Krupp breech-loading rifles and shiny steel cannons. The war monster had been awakened. And its first target was Denmark, 1864. Bismarck was extremely crafty when he lured Austria, his biggest rival, into participating in this war together. That was a one-shot, two-birds move. He used Austrian troops to fight Denmark, but at the same time, he also used this war to create a territorial dispute trap later, creating an excuse to eliminate Austria's influence in Germany. After Denmark's total defeat, Bismarck began to arrange the chessboard to isolate Austria. He went to meet Napoleon III of France, using vague promises of territory to keep France out of the conflict. He allied with Italy to force Austria into a two-front war. Year 1866. Gunfire echoed on the fields of Bohemia. All of Europe believed that Austria, with its rich history and large numbers, would crush Prussia. But they were wrong. Thanks to a modern railway system and high-speed breech-loading guns, the Prussian army moved like lightning. The Battle of Königgrätz. In the thick fog, the Prussian army executed a perfect encirclement. In just 7 weeks, one of Europe's oldest empires, Austria, was knocked down. But this was when Bismarck's innate talent really shone. When the Prussian generals and even the king wanted to march into Vienna to humiliate the Austrians, Bismarck vehemently opposed it. He even threatened to jump out of the window and commit suicide if the king didn't stop. Why? Because Bismarck did not want to destroy Austria. He only wanted to kick Austria out of the German unification game. He needed an Austria that was hurt, but still strong enough to be a future ally, not a permanent enemy. That was the height of Realpolitik, practical politics. No personal revenge, only cold calculations for the future of the empire. The North German Confederation was born. Prussia became the hegemon of the North, but in the South, states like Bavaria were still hesitant, and in the West, the French tiger was growling. Napoleon III realized he had been tricked by Bismarck and began to prepare for a bloody battle. Bismarck smiled. He knew that for Germans to truly come to a common home, they needed a common enemy. And for that enemy, no one was more suitable than France. Chapter 4. The EMS telegram and the trick of the century. Year 1870, Prussia at this time was like a giant that had just awakened, stretching its arms to occupy all of North Germany. But Bismarck was still not satisfied. He looked down the map to the south, where principalities like Bavaria or Baden were still hesitant. They feared Prussian domination as much as they feared French arrogance. Bismarck understood that only a burning national fire could melt those final barriers, and he needed Napoleon III, the Emperor of France, to be the lighter. The opportunity came from an unexpected place: Spain. The throne in Madrid was empty, and a relative of King Wilhelm I of Prussia was invited to succeed. France panicked. They feared being caught between the two Hohenzollern pincers in both the east and the west. Napoleon III immediately sent an ambassador to meet King Wilhelm II at the Ems hot springs to demand a permanent promise: never to allow a Prussian to sit on the Spanish throne. King Wilhelm I, an old and moderate aristocrat, politely refused the request and sent a telegram back to Bismarck. That night, Bismarck was having dinner with General Moltke and Minister Roon. When he read the telegram, his face hardened. He asked Moltke, "Is our army ready?" Moltke replied briefly, "Ready." With a cold smile, Bismarck picked up his pen. He didn't add any lies. He just sharpened the telegram. He cut out the polite words, turning a normal diplomatic exchange into an insulting manifesto, making the Germans see their king insulted by the French ambassador, and making the French see their ambassador kicked out by the Prussian king. Bismarck told his friends, "This will be a red rag thrown in front of the French bull." And just as predicted, when the telegram was published, all of Paris exploded in a mad rage. Napoleon III, for the honor of the empire, fell into the trap. On July 19, 1870, France declared war on Prussia. That was exactly what Bismarck was waiting for. The moment France declared war, the southern German states immediately saw France as the aggressor. They forgot their fear of Prussia. They only saw themselves as Germans being threatened. All the German-speaking states united into a solid bloc under the leadership of Bismarck. The chessboard was set. Now it was time for Moltke's army to carry out the Iron Mission. Chapter 5. Napoleon III's Nightmare and the Battle of Sedan. The French went to war with faith in the glory of the time of Napoleon the Great. They had more modern chassepot rifles, but the Prussians had something more terrible: a ruthlessly scientific organization and superior Krupp steel cannons. Under the command of the genius Moltke, the German army did not attack head-on. They moved like a giant net. Napoleon III, now old and sick, directly took to the field to boost the soldiers' morale. But he didn't know he was heading into an inescapable trap in the city of Sedan. September 1870. The Sedan Valley became a death funnel. From the heights, Prussian cannons poured a storm of fire onto the French. Napoleon III looked around and only saw death and chaos. With no hope of escape, the last emperor of France was forced to order the white flag to be raised. The moment Napoleon III handed over the surrender sword to King Wilhelm was one of the most shocking moments in history. France's Second Empire collapsed right there. But for Bismarck, capturing the French emperor was not the final goal. He marched into Paris. The City of Light was besieged in the hunger and cold of the winter of 1871. While the people of Paris had to eat even rat meat to survive, at the Palace of Versailles, Bismarck was preparing for the most glorious drama of his life. Chapter 6. The birth of the German Empire in the heart of France. January 18, 1871. In the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, among the paintings honoring the victories of the French in the past, all the German princes and generals were fully gathered. Bismarck stood there, in the white uniform of the Prussian Guards. He read the declaration of the establishment of the German Empire. King Wilhelm III of Prussia officially became the Emperor, Kaiser, of a unified Germany. This was the brightest peak of Bismarck. With schemes, with the blood of soldiers, and with an iron will, he had achieved what for centuries no one could, packing 39 patches into an iron frame named the German Empire. Germany, from a geographical concept, became a great power leading Europe. But victory always comes with hatred. Bismarck forced France to sign a harsh treaty, losing the rich Alsace-Lorraine and paying 5 billion gold francs. This was the seed of hatred that would lead to World War I later. Something that Bismarck himself dimly realized in his late life calculations. Chapter 7. The Puppeteer of Europe. After unifying Germany, Bismarck completely changed his style. From a disruptor of the world order, he became the protector of peace in Europe. Why would an Iron Chancellor want peace? The answer was very practical. Germany was satiated. He understood that if Germany continued to expand, all the other powers like Britain, Russia, and France would unite to destroy Germany. Therefore, for the next 20 years, Bismarck played the most sophisticated diplomatic game in history, the game of alliances. He connected with Austria-Hungary, then secretly signed a treaty with Russia. He encouraged France to seek colonies in Africa so they would forget the shame of losing Alsace-Lorraine. He turned Germany into the center of all international negotiations. At the Congress of Berlin in 1878, Bismarck played the role of honest broker, redistributing interests in the Balkans to prevent a major war between empires. He kept Europe balanced on a thin rope, and the end of that rope was firmly in his hands. However, at home, Bismarck had to face new enemies, Catholics, and especially socialists. He launched the Kulturkampf culture war to limit the power of the church. When he saw the workers' movement rising, he used the stick and carrot tactic. On one hand, he banned socialist organizations from operating. On the other hand, he did something that shocked the whole world. He enacted the world's first social insurance and pension system. Bismarck said, "If you want workers not to follow the revolutionary faction, give them a reason to love the state." But darkness began to cover his career when the old king Wilhelm III died. The successor was Wilhelm II, an arrogant, impulsive young man hungry for absolute power. Wilhelm II did not want to be a puppet in the hands of the elderly prime minister. Chapter 8. The Sunset of the Old Wolf. Year 1890. The conflict between the young emperor and the 75-year-old prime minister reached its climax. Wilhelm II wanted Germany to expand to the oceans, to compete with Britain, something Bismarck considered suicide. In a foggy morning, after a heated argument, Bismarck was forced to sign his resignation. The image of dropping the pilot became a famous caricature of that time. The old wolf of Germany was pushed out of politics, returning to his Friedrichsruh estate in loneliness and bitterness. In his final years, Bismarck constantly gave warnings. He saw Wilhelm II destroying the alliance system he had built. He saw Germany rushing into a mad arms race. In one final meeting with the emperor, Bismarck uttered a terrifying prophecy. "Your Majesty, if things continue like this, then 20 years after I die, your empire will collapse." On July 30th, 1898, Otto von Bismarck breathed his last. On his tombstone, he only requested a brief line, "A loyal servant of King Wilhelm III." Exactly 20 years after he died, in 1918, the German Empire completely collapsed after World War I, just as he had prophesied. The gunfire of the Battle of Sarajevo in the Balkans, what he called some foolish thing, had ended the dream of an eternal Germany that he had spent his life building. Otto von Bismarck was not a saint. He was a flawed giant who used blood and iron to write history. But whether loved or hated, one cannot deny, he was the one who molded the face of modern Europe. The legacy of the giant, from iron to welfare. If Bismarck were to come back to life in the 21st century, he would probably smile to see that his ideas are the backbone of prosperous nations. His legacy to posterity can be summarized through three great relics. 1. The first welfare state in the world. Iron hand in a velvet glove. Many people mistakenly believe that social insurance or pensions are products of modern liberal governments. But in reality, it was the Iron Chancellor, an extreme conservative, who was the father of it. The breaking the wind tactic. Bismarck did not enact insurance because he pitied the poor. He did it to rob the forum from the socialists. He understood that if the state cared for workers when sick or old, they would be loyal to the dynasty instead of making a revolution. Legacy today. The Bismarck system is still the foundation for social security in Germany, France, Japan, and many other countries. Every time you receive a health insurance card or pay into a pension fund, you are inheriting part of the legacy of his cold but effective calculations. 2. Realpolitik. The art of the possible. Bismarck took the term Realpolitik, practical politics, to a new level. He taught the world that in diplomacy, ideals or morals are just the outer paint. The core must be national interest and the balance of power. Fragile balance. He was a master at keeping his rivals from uniting against him. The way he spun between Russia, Austria, and Britain has become a textbook for diplomats like Henry Kissinger. Lessons for the modern day. In today's volatile, multipolar world, Bismarck's mindset of no permanent enemies, only permanent interests, remains a guiding star for great powers when confronting or cooperating with each other on the global geopolitical chessboard. 3. One Germany, one nation, one destiny. Before Bismarck, Germany was just a vague cultural concept. After Bismarck, it became an unshakable political, economic, and military entity in the heart of Europe. He did not just unify with guns, he unified through infrastructure, a common currency, and a central bank. He created a massive domestic market, laying the foundation for Germany's industrial power today. However, he also left a painful lesson. His use of nationalism to unify the country unintentionally created a monster that later generations, like Wilhelm II or later the Nazis, could not control, leading to disasters for Germany and the world. Otto von Bismarck was not a saint. He was a flawed giant who used blood and iron to write history. But whether loved or hated, one cannot deny, he was the one who molded the face of modern Europe. Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor. It all started in a small village named Schönhausen. The end. Orchestral Final Symphony.